All right, this video has been a long time coming. It's time to finally talk about the full base set of DC Dual Force. And yes, we do have a full card list, at least at the time of me recording this video. I'm underneath the impression that what you're looking at right now is indeed the full card list. And we're going to go over all of the green cards today. This is the Energy faction. Earlier today, I put out a video talking about all of the game's core rules. If you're not familiar with them, you can find that video linked in the description. It might be important for watching this video. I also want to quickly remind you to come join the DC Dual Force community Discord that I've been running. That'll also be linked in the description. We're 500 people strong. Please come join us. We'd love to have you. Oh, and let me know in the comments which faction you'd like me to cover next. Okay, so before we get into individual cards, I also need to mention some tokens. Actually, quite a lot of tokens. There are two archetypes inside of the Energy faction that rely on token cards that are generated outside of the game's collection. One of them is Lightning Bolt. Thankfully, Lightning Bolt is a pretty straightforward thing. Lightning Bolt is a zero cost card, so this card would not count towards one of the two cards you're allowed to play each turn. You can just play a Lightning Bolt for free, and it reads, deal 2 damage to an enemy character, draw a card. So it's a free 2 damage, and it lets you cycle through your deck. There's lots of cards that synergize with Lightning Bolt. We'll probably talk a lot about Lightning Bolt in this video, but until we get there, I want to also quickly mention spells. And there are a lot of magical spells. As you can see, there are 21 magical spells, and these things do a wide variety of things. I've done my best to separate these spells into different categories, so it's a little bit easier to read. On the top row here, we have buffs of some sort. In the middle row here, we have damage effects or something that directly impacts an enemy creature. And then on the bottom row is a bit more miscellaneous, but generally it's something like generating you a card or giving you some type of resource. So yes, there is a lot of variety to spells, but generally they're going to be doing positive things for you, less so than hurting the enemy. There's just more cards that affect you in positive ways than disrupting the enemy, but there are powerful disruption effects in there, dealing 1 damage to an enemy character, dealing 1 damage to each enemy character, dealing 1 to 5 damage to an enemy character, exhausting an enemy character. All of this stuff can be super important. Oh, in this case, it's actually exhaust an enemy recruit, which there is a distinction. Recruits are the minions that you play from your hand, and characters can be anything. They can be leaders, they can be recruits, they can be absolutely anything. I think that's everything that I need to mention for spells, and then we'll talk about spells a lot more as we continue to mention cards that mention spells. All right, so those are the big tokens out of the way. We can focus on the actual cards now. Let's first start with the leaders. First, we'll go over the Flash, because you've probably seen the Flash before. The Flash is a 17 health leader or 17 defense leader. This is the lowest defense energy leader in the game, but he's got a really big payoff. So he's got a 2-cost ability, so you're going to be able to use this thing every 2 turns, and it reads, the Flash gets +2 attack and flurry this turn. Flurry means once it's done attacking, it can attack again. So it gets a bonus attack each turn. The Flash opens up some really incredible aggressive strategies. I think the Flash is going to be a really, really powerful leader. Personally going to probably be my main character for quite some time as I try to figure out the game. And yes, there's a ton of aggressive support inside of the Energy faction, as you'll see as we talk through this. So yeah, I think the Flash is going to make the cut. We'll go in order of defense value here. So we'll go to Zatanna next. She's got a 2-cost ability as well, and she reads, seek a magical spell. So we just went over all of the magical spells, but I'll quickly show you the slide again. Lots and lots of cool magical spells here. Now, seek is a unique keyword. We don't actually know the function of the keyword, but my current assumption is that seek is similar to Hearthstone's discover mechanic. So when you seek, you're going to have 3 different options available to you, and then you're going to select one of the options, and then you'll gain that copy of the card. So basically, you'll get a look into the library of all the available spells. You'll choose one of those spells best applicable for your situation, and you'll select that. And there's a lot of things to keep in mind when selecting these spells. Not only do you need to keep in mind, hey, what can I actually play right now? Because you're limited to the game's resource system. If you only have a bronze resource available to you, all of the silver ones are completely useless. But you also have to keep in mind, a lot of these are actually null values. So you can use some of these cards for quote unquote free, which is something you'll probably want to aim for a lot of the time, I think. I'm going to really enjoy playing Zatanna. Zatanna is actually one of the characters I was looking forward to seeing the most. So I'm happy she has such a robust support system around her. There's lots of cards that kind of contribute to this magic spell archetype, and we'll see that as we go through the video. Moving on to Hal Jordan at 20 defense, the highest value we've seen so far, with the exception of Shazam, which we'll talk about just next. At the start of your turn, create a green lantern in your hand. There are a lot of green lanterns. How many, you might ask? There are 9. 4 of them are bronze, 3 of them are silver, 1 of them is gold, and 1 of them is free. Hal Jordan's going to be giving you access to 1 of these every single turn. That is a huge resource generation, and I think it's going to be pretty good. Green lanterns are all designed to synergize with each other, so you can focus on adding other synergies to your deck without having to add the actual green lanterns themselves, because Hal Jordan's going to be able to generate those for you. Now, of course, you're probably going to want to add some key, very important green lanterns to synergize with the fact that you are running Hal Jordan, but it's nice to know that no matter what the rest of the 20 cards in my energy side of my deck are, Hal Jordan's going to be providing those Green Lanterns for me. And if I don't draw them, if I low roll and maybe I'm drawing the other half of my deck and I'm just not hitting my Green Lanterns, Hal Jordan's able to back me up, so it's pretty cool. But then on top of that, we haven't even talked about his actual ability yet, which is Hal Jordan gets +3 attack this turn and generate a bronze resource. So if you hit any of those bottom 4 that we talked about, those 4 cheapest cards there with the exception of the free one, so if you hit Chip, Chaselon, Jessica Cruz, or Simon Baz, you're going to be able to play those completely for free. So Hal Jordan has a pretty consistent tempo, I'll say, or curve that should work out pretty well for him. Now, it is unclear what floating energy looks like in this game. So we know that we have the 2 energy right there in the center of our board. What happens if we generate a resource while we have maxed out resources there? So let's say, for example, I used Hal Jordan's effect at the start of my turn, and now I haven't played any cards. Does my newly generated bronze energy, does that float until I've used my other energy, or did I just waste that? That has not been made 100% clear. It's going to be important, but it's not necessarily going to be important for Hal Jordan's effect, because you can always just delay it and work around it. But there are going to be some effects where that matters, and we'll talk about that. Actually, probably won't mention that in this video, because I don't think there's anything that gets brought up for that in the energy faction. But it is an important thing to keep in mind. Moving on to Shazam. Shazam is awesome. Shazam is a 3-cost, or he has a 3-cost ability that reads, Shazam gets +5 attack this turn and create 5 lightning bolts in your deck. So lightning bolts are those tokens that we talked about before. They deal 2 damage to an enemy character and they draw you a card. You get 5 of these just shuffled straight into your deck. That's fantastic. You're going to want a lot of lightning bolts in your deck. In some of the practice games that I played on Tabletop Simulator, I was incredibly unlucky with these. I had 23 lightning bolts in my deck and I only drew 1 of them. So obviously you can really low roll with the lightning bolts, but in theory, once you get enough of those shuffled into your deck, you're going to be able to cycle through your deck really quickly. And in a game where you can normally only play 2 cards, you're going to be playing a lot of cards. It's going to be very beneficial to your strategy, especially as we see some of these cards we get into. So I've talked a lot already, and we're only just now jumping into the actual card list for the energy faction. We've only up until this point talked about leaders and tokens. So let's get speed running and get right into it. So we're going to do this in order of bronze to silver and then gold, and then within each of those tiers we're going to focus on the individual packages. So let's start off with the bronze cards of the lightning bolt package, starting off with Eugene Choi, which I think is probably one of the best lightning bolt cards we have so far. Eugene Choi has aura, which is aura means it's kind of like spell shield. So if I was to target Eugene Choi with some type of action card to deal damage to him, it's not going to work. The rest of his effect reads, deploy, create 3 lightning bolts in your deck. What a fantastic effect. We get access to 3 lightning bolts nice and early into the game, and he's a 2/3, which is already pretty decent stats for a bronze card. Moving on to Pedro, he's not exactly a lightning bolt card, but he's obviously designed to synergize with the lightning bolt cards. He also has aura. He's a 1/3. He reads, after you play an action, and yes, the lightning bolts are actions, Pedro gets +2 attack this turn. So it's a lot of attack, especially when you factor in how many lightning bolts you want to be playing in a single turn. I think you're going to want to hold on to those lightning bolts until you can combo them with cards like Pedro. I don't think Pedro is the ultimate payoff card, and we'll see more of these payoff cards as we progress throughout this video. Let's move on to the Green Lantern package, and there's a lot of Green Lanterns to talk about in the bronze category. First of all, we have Chaselon. Chaselon reads, the first time you play another Green Lantern, each turn generate a bronze resource. That is super, super strong. There's a few reasons it's really strong. A lot of the lanterns ask you to pay an additional resource in order to get a additional effect, and we'll see that in just a moment. But also, you're always going to have access to more Green Lanterns because you're most likely going to be running Hal Jordan as your leader, so you're going to have this infinite flux of Chaselon value, and I expect that to be quite strong. Next, we'll talk about Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz simultaneously because they're essentially the same card but in reverse. One's a 3/2 and the other one's a 2/3. Let's focus on Jessica Cruz at first. She's the 2/3 and she reads, you may pay an additional bronze resource to give Jessica Cruz and a random Green Lantern in your hand +3 attack. And then Simon Baz is the opposite of that, giving +3 defense. Both of these cards seem spectacular. I think that Baz is significantly better than Jessica Cruz. I think in most cases, you're going to prefer a defense value over an attack value in this game. So Baz is a little bit better, I think, but I think you're probably just going to run them. If you're running one, you're probably running the other. Moving on to Chip. Chip is a 2/2. He reads, deploy, you may play an extra bronze resource, give Chip and a random Green Lantern in your hand, +1/+1, and aura. This is probably the worst Green Lantern we've talked about so far, but that's not necessarily saying that he's bad, because All of the Green Lanterns seem pretty good so far. Yeah, I mean, I think he's fine. I mean, I don't think +1/+1's too good, especially because a lot of bronze cards are going to be able to take out a 3/2. Giving +1/+1 to the card in your hand is probably better than giving it to Chip, though. So maybe that stat bonus is enough to overwhelm the opponent. Who knows? For the Ring of Choices, this reads seek a Green Lantern and give them +2/+2. The only issue I see with this card is that you only want so many Green Lanterns, right? You're already putting Green Lanterns into your deck. Hal Jordan is generating you Green Lanterns. So do you really need the Ring of Choices? Maybe you do to help find a specific Green Lantern. I'm not sure though. It feels like we might be committing a little too hard now to the number of Green Lanterns we have in our deck, but maybe it's fine because we probably, honestly, I don't think we run, say like Chip, for example. Instead, we probably prefer to run the Ring of Choices just for the flexibility, but it is also an action that you're spending and you only get to play 2 cards per turn, so maybe it isn't worth it, but it just seems like such a solid effect. Surely this is worth running. Moving on to the magical spells, or at least the magical spells synergy cards. First starting off with Timothy Hunter. Timothy Hunter is a 1/4. He reads deploy if you have a magical spell in your hand, create and play Pyromancy. So Pyromancy is a specific magical spell, and that reads deal 1 damage to each enemy character. So Pyromancy is a fantastic magical spell, but it's probably only going to be useful in specific scenarios. I think dealing 1 damage to each enemy character is going to be very matchup dependent on whether you need it or not. With that said, Timothy Hunter does have 4 defense, which is quite a high defense value for a bronze card, but he only has 1 attack, but he kind of mitigates that with the Pyromancy damage, so maybe it's worth it. You do already need the magical spell in your hand to get value out of Timothy, so you're probably never playing him on turn 1. I think most of your bronze cards, you're going to want them to be good enough to play on turn 1. So my hopes are high for Timothy, but my expectations are low. Moving on to Helmet of Fate, which actually has a super interesting effect. I really like this. Create a copy of this in your deck. So when you play the card, you're immediately going to get another copy of it shuffled into your deck. Draw a card and give a friendly recruit +1/+1 for each magical spell you've played this game. Now, Timothy is going to get some value out of some Helmet of Fate. Let me tell you that much. +1/+1 for each spell you've played this game is going to go crazy. And you're going to get more and more value out of this card as the game progresses because you're going to have less cards in your decks and you're going to have more and more Helmet of Fates in your deck. Definitely a big payoff for a potential control strategy. Check this out. Seek a magical spell. That's what the effective Gift of Nabu does. But the secondary effect is after you play a magical spell, Gift of Nabu becomes free this turn. You're going to want to hold this card. You're not going to want to play this card as its bronze counterpart. You're going to wait until you play another magical spell. That way you can seek yet another magical spell and kind of get that loop going. The last 2 cards we talked about make me really excited for the magical spell archetype between Helmet of Fate and Gift of Nabu, but we've got one more to go over, and that is Book of Destiny, which reads, create a magical spell in your hand. So unlike the other cards here, we're not seeking a magical spell, we're just getting one. So we don't get to choose between 3 or do anything like that. We're just creating a magical spell. The first time you play Book of Destiny, return it to your hand. So you're going to get multiple magical spells out of Book of Destiny, but I don't think it's going to be enough magical spells to justify the amount of actions you're spending on this. You're spending 1 action to get your first magical spell, and then you're going to have to spend another action to get another magical spell. And in both cases, it might not be a magical spell that you need or can get value out of in that particular situation. But maybe if you've got enough tempo on board, you can get away with a little bit of a slower strategy with the Book of Destiny. But really, if you compare Book of Destiny to, say, Gift of Nabu or Helmet of Fate, I think it comes up a little bit short. Maybe it's just worth running if we're going to be playing that many magical spells anyway, or maybe it doesn't make the cut. Who knows? Oh, I'm adding this in post because I forgot to talk about it during the Green Lantern section, and that's Green Lantern Cadet, who is also a Green Lantern. This is a free card. Now, I think free cards in general are going to be quite strong. Just because they're free. So, I mean, normally you're limited to playing 2 cards per turn in DC Dual Force. Having the ability to play a 3rd card can sometimes be a huge difference maker. And sometimes you're just going to get this for free off of Hal Jordan. So, literally, who cares? I think this card's going to be great. It's just a matter of whether he actually makes the cut in the deck or whether we just rely on generating him from other effects. Okay, we can finally talk about non-synergistic cards. So these are just energy cards that don't fall into any particular package. And I gotta say, I'm in love with some of these cards, man. So first of all, let's focus on Energy Blast. This is just a standard spot damage spell. You've seen this 1,000 times in other card games. It's probably fine. I will say spot damage is probably a little worse than it is in a traditional card game, just because you're spending one of your only 2 actions per turn. But honestly, I think it's still fine. It's still probably a good card. Moving on to Green Lantern Power Battery. This one's again going to be very important for that Green Lantern synergy we talked about earlier. Perhaps I should have mentioned this in the Green Lantern section, but I think other decks will also take advantage of this. So it just reads generate 2 bronze resources, and that's obviously going to be great for the Green Lantern package, but it's also just going to be great for quote-unquote ramping out more cards. I think this card's great. Moving on to Ambush Bug. Ambush Bug is a 2/2. with the effect speed. So the speed means it can attack the turn it's played. And then deploy, ambush bug gets ambushed this turn. So ambush means it attacks first. So if I attack with ambush bug into another ambush bug, my ambush bug would live, but my opponents would die because mine would attack first, ultimately killing his ambush bug, and then his ambush bug wouldn't be there to attack me back. So ambush bug is going to be able to get a ton of trading value the turn it's played, and then afterwards it's just going to be a unit to punch the opponent with. So I think this would be good for aggressive strategies, really good for the early game taking control of the board. I think ambush bug is actually a fantastic card, and I expect to use him in quite a few decks. I'm definitely going to use him in one deck that I've been theory crafting a lot. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce this, so I won't butcher it, but it's a 3/1, and it reads deploy, create, and play a Crystal Blast. Crystal Blast is, again, one of those magical spells we mentioned earlier, so you could use this in a magical spell deck, but you don't necessarily need to. It's a free action, so it doesn't cost anything. It just reads deal 1 damage to an enemy character. I mean, this is absolutely fine. Think of it as something like an Elven Archer, because that's really what it is. It's a ping damage. You can just choose to deal damage or something. And then on top of that, it also has the synergy with the magical spell package. So even outside of that, even if it didn't have that synergy, I would say that this is a good card. So it's probably really good now that it has that synergy as well. Moving on to Naomi, man, I am excited about Naomi. Naomi is fantastic. She synergizes with the magical spell archetype, but she also synergizes with the lightning bolt archetype, because obviously you want to play lots of lightning bolts to shuffle through your deck. They're free cards. They draw you more free cards, and Naomi synergizes with all of that, getting +1/+1 for each individual card you play. I'm going to have a ton of fun with Naomi, and I refuse to believe she isn't good. This is a fantastic card, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. Moving on to Iris West, who is also a 1/1 with the effect your leaders have +1 attack. I think an attack value on leaders is really, really good. There's 2 reasons it's really good. One, it's just another free body for you to attack with, but also when it's on the opponent's action, when it's their turn, they can't freely attack into your leaders anymore without receiving retaliate damage. So already I was big on Iris West before I started reading anything else, but then she also reads, on your turn, your flash leader is invincible. This is going to set up for some awesome scenarios where Iris West and the Flash are absolutely going to clear the board. The Flash is going to be able to get up to 3 attack and attack twice during his turn, and he's not going to receive any retaliate damage for it. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. Iris West, I'm very, very high on this card. I think she's fantastic, and she's absolutely going in my day 1 aggro deck. Speaking of day 1 aggro decks, we have Liberty Bell, who's just a vanilla 3/1 with the effect Speed, which means she can attack the turn she comes into play. Very, very powerful effect. We've talked about how some of this aggressive archetype is really coming together, and it starts with Liberty Bell, man. A bronze card that we can play on turn 1 and attack with. That's fantastic. Speaking of aggressive cards, we've got 2 coming up right now. We got Max Mercury, who's a 2/3 with the keyword Flurry. Flurry just means you can attack twice. Yeah, obviously a great, fantastic, aggressive card. We're jamming this in every aggressive deck. And then we're also going to move on to Darla Dudley, who similarly has is almost an identical card, in fact. But instead of having 3 defense, she has Aura and just 1 defense. So I'm probably just jamming both Max Mercury and Daria into all of my aggressive decks moving forward. And the last card we're going to talk about in the bronze category, oh my gosh, we're almost out of the bronze cards here, is Stargirl. She's a 3/3, and she reads start, generate a bronze resource. So every single turn at the beginning of your turn, you're going to generate a bronze resource. This is why I think that resources are going to float into the next turn, float even if I have my max number of resources. So let's say I have a silver and a bronze. If I generate another bronze, I think all that's going to happen there is I'll just have like a 3rd floating resource. But obviously there's no way of us knowing that for sure. For now, we're just going to assume that as far as this review is concerned. And in that case, I think Stargirl is going to be fantastic. It's essentially a way I can play an additional card every turn, which is really, really good. Plus, she's just a vanilla 3/3, which is fantastic stats. Sounds great to me. Now, the way resource generation might work is if I have a silver and a bronze and I generate another bronze, my first bronze might just become a silver. Again, it's difficult to say, but I'm going to assume that my first interpretation was correct until proven otherwise. But either way, I think Stargirl's pretty great. That's the highest stat bronze card we've went over today, which is probably worth mentioning, right? She's got 6 worth of stats all on her own. Moving on to the silver category, man, we have a lot of cards to go over still. Let's focus first on the magical spell package. First, we have Madame Xanadu. Xanadu. I'm going to go with Xanadu. Not sure how to pronounce this one, but hopefully I didn't butcher it too bad. She's a silver card. She's got 4 attack and 5 defense. She reads start, create a magical spell in hand. So every single turn, she's going to generate your magical spell. Can't play this card until turn 3, though, and that's going to be the case for all of these silver cards, assuming our interpretation of the resource system is correct. We're not going to be able to play these cards for 3 turns, which actually isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. I mean, really, It's not. As long as your opening hand isn't all silver cards, you're chilling. With that in mind, I think generating a magical spell every single turn is great. The only problem with this is that, of course, it's not seeking a magical card. You're only generating a random one, so you're not going to be able to control this at all. And of course, there are so many magical spells that oftentimes you're not going to hit what you want in that particular situation. Moving on to John Constantine. Very glad that John Constantine managed to find his way into the base set. He is a 4/4, and he reads, after you play a magical spell, give a friendly recruit, or give your friendly recruits, not a friendly recruit, give your friendly recruits +1/+1 and aura. Now, +1/+1, giving all your recruits +1/+1, it's not as good as it might seem on face value because you only have 3 board slots in this game, so you got to keep that in mind as we think about cards. So at best, he's giving 3 cards. Oh, sorry, no, he's giving up to 4 cards because he doesn't say other cards. He says give your friendly recruits, so that'll include himself. So at best, he's giving +1/+1 to 4 cards, and he's also giving them aura as well. Yeah, I mean, this card seems good. I don't know if it necessarily plugs into the magical spell archetype, though, because I feel like a lot of magical spell decks are probably going to lean, well, pretty spell and action heavy, but we're going to see some pretty awesome spell payoff cards here later on, so maybe it will be worth leaning a bit more into that recruit side of things. We'll move on to the lightning bolt category now because we only have one lightning bolt card to talk about, and that's the Power of Hope. This is a great card. It reads, create a lightning bolt in your deck for each friendly character. At least this is going to give you 2 lightning bolts, but the more characters you have on board is going to give you more and more lightning bolts. Now, I did say at least 2, but if you do lose one of your leaders, then it's going to be only 1. But if you're that deep into the game, you're probably not going to play this card anyway. It's not exactly an out. It will be interesting, though, if you've already generated a lot of lightning bolts, you can always use this card to try to fish for another lightning bolt when you need it. So it's nice that it generates lightning bolts, but it's also nice that it draws cards and helps you get a little bit deeper into the deck. All right, let's move on to the Green Lanterns. Lots of cool Green Lanterns to talk about in the silver tier. Focusing first on Kilowog. Kilowog is a 4/6, and he reads, deploy. You may pay a bronze resource to give Green Lanterns, or Green Lantern recruits, everywhere +1/+1. I assume that also includes cards generated by Hal Jordan, and if that's the case, Kilowog's gonna go pretty crazy. Looking forward to that. I do think +1/+1 should be valued a little bit less than in traditional card games in this game, but it's still a very strong effect. Moving on to John Stewart. Very, very happy John Stewart made it into the game. Deploy, you may pay 1 bronze resource to deal damage equal to John Stewart's attack value to an enemy character. So this has synergy with the previously mentioned Jessica Cruz, which gives a +3 attack to something in your hand. In this case, if it hits John Stewart, it's adding damage to the effect that John Stewart will end up playing later in the game. But also there are other payoff cards later on that will buff cards in your hand. But not only John Stewart, also Kyle Rayner. Kyle Rayner is a 3/3. Who reads, deploy, you may pay an additional bronze resource to summon a Construct Kaiju. So here's a Construct Kaiju. Construct Kaijus read, if you do not have Kyle Rayner, sacrifice this. So basically, if Kyle Rayner is destroyed, so will the Construct. But additionally, it reads, deploy, Construct Kaiju gets double the attack and defense value of Kyle Rayner. So if we get Kyle Rayner to a 6/3, that means our Construct Kaiju is going to be a 12/6. And vice versa. Pretty cool indeed. Now, again, the only problem is that if they kill off Kyle Rayner, your construct is gone, but you can always play Kyle Rayner in the back row, in the middle, and then have Construct Kaiju summon in front of him. Now it's going to be a lot harder for them to deal with Kyle Rayner because he's behind the Construct Kaiju, and they can't attack that Kyle Rayner without having to deal with that front row first. All right, that's all of our synergy-focused cards out of the way. Let's move on to the standard silver cards. We've got Booster Gold with Firepower +1, and he is a 4/5. Unfortunately, we don't know what Firepower does. I have reached out to try and get some clarification on it. I don't think we're going to get clarification within the next 24 hours or so, so I'm not going to be able to focus on this card. Perhaps I'll mention this in another video where we get to talk about Firepower, but unfortunately, no news on Firepower just yet, so I'll withhold my judgment for Booster Gold. I will say, though, that 4/5 for stats is pretty good, so as long as Firepower is at the very least an okay effect, I'm sure Booster Gold will be a fine card. Firestorm, man, I am looking forward to Firestorm. I like Firestorm a lot, man. Firestorm reads, end, deal 2 damage to each enemy in Firestorm's lane for each other card you've played this turn. So this synergizes fantastically with not only the magical spells, but also, and I think primarily, he synergizes with lightning bolts. Now, I will mention that Firestorm does specifically read each other card you play, so he doesn't count himself. So if you play Firestorm and then one more card, Firestorm's only going to deal 2 damage, but he's still effectively dealing 4 damage because he could hit up to 2 targets, right? Because he hits everybody in that lane, or it could help you target an important card. Like we've just recently talked about the Kyle Rayner Construct Kaiju setup, where we put the Kaiju in front of Kyle Rayner to protect Kyle Rayner. Well, Firestorm can get past that combo. If you play Firestorm in response to that, and then another card, and then say a Lightning Bolt to help you draw another card, you've now played 3 cards. That means that Firestorm, and one of them was Firestorm, so that means you've played 2 additional cards. So Firestorm's going to deal 4 damage in total. He's going to deal 4 damage to that back row and that front row. So the front row damage doesn't really matter though, but it's enough to kill off the Kyle Rayner and then ultimately the Kaiju as well. So lots of cool setup stuff you can do with Firestorm. Really excited about this card. Probably one of my favorite cards that have been revealed so far. Moving on to Mary Bromfield. Mary Bromfield is a 4/4. She reads Deploy. She also has Aura. Sorry, I missed that part. She reads Deploy. Other friendly recruits with Aura get +2/+2. So we saw a little bit of Aura synergy with some of the other Shazam adjacent cards. I think you'll really see the Aura package come together in another faction, and then you'll have that spliced in with some of the energy cards that we've talked about today, and Mary will be a part of that. You'll of course include Mary in any Aura focused decks. The nice thing about having some Aura synergy is that Aura on its own isn't like a particularly exciting effect. Like it protects you from spells, but if my opponent doesn't play any spells, then it's not really getting any value. Where if you have a card like Mary, who's able to buff all of your Aura cards, you can get away with building an Aura deck, despite the fact that your deck's not going to have any major upside against specific matchups who don't play a lot of actions. You're going to be able to offset that by just giving everybody +2/+2, which is a great effect. Moving on to Red Tornado, who has Flurry. He's a 1/6, so pretty low stats, but don't worry, he's about to make up for that. He reads Deploy. After another friendly character attacks this turn, Red Tornado gets +1 attack. Oh yeah, Red Tornado is fantastic, and he works great with the Flash as well. The Flash obviously has the ability to attack twice per turn with his effect, so already just with the Flash, without any other cards on the field, without any other effects, Red Tornado is getting up to 3 attack, which is going to be an additional 6 damage in total between both of Red Tornado's effects as well, because he has Flurry. Lots of aggressive damage coming out there very, very quickly. You can see how it's all starting to add up between some of the more aggressive cards we talked about earlier with cards like Max Mercury, Darla Dudley, Liberty Bell, Red Tornado, and the Flash. We've got a fantastic aggressive package right there, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. Moving on to Freddy Freeman. He's also a part of that Aura package we talked about just before. He reads Aura. After you play an action, create 2 copies of it in your deck. Now, the great thing about Freddy Freeman is he synergizes with a lot of things. He synergizes with the magical spell faction, or not faction. He synergizes with the magical spell archetype. He synergizes with the lightning bolt archetype. He synergizes with literally any action in the game, and then also he has synergy with the Aura package if you wanted to include Freddy in that as well. Next up is Stripe. Stripe's just a vanilla silver card with 8 attack and 4 defense. Yes, I think this is good enough to run. 4 defense is definitely on the lower side for a silver card, but 8 is just so much damage, and we just talked about how aggressive some of these cards can be and how aggressive some of your decks can be in this game. I think Stripe absolutely makes the cut. I fully expect to be playing quite a bit of Stripe, at least until we get the first couple expansions out of the way, and maybe he'll eventually be outclassed pretty quickly. But for now, I think he's just fine. Solstice. Solstice is a 4/3. The first time you deal non-attack damage, so I assume this means you have to deal damage with a spell or your leader ability or something like that, that isn't involving attacking something. So the first time you deal non-attack damage during your turn, draw a card. This is a great synergy card for the Lightning Bolt archetype, but not just the Lightning Bolt archetype. Obviously, there'll be other ways to deal non-combat damage or non-attack damage, but it just happens to play so well with the Lightning Bolt. If you pull off Lightning Bolt and Solstice in the same turn, you're going to be drawing 2 cards off of 1 activation. It's going to start adding up quite quickly, and that's very exciting. Next, we've got the Wizard Shazam, another card that I think works quite well in the Lightning Bolt package, but it also worked well in some other packages. Obviously, it has Aura, so it plugs in quite well. It's a 4/5 with Aura, and it reads Start, which means start of turn, draw an action. This is a fantastic effect because not only is it card draw, but it's targeted card draw, so we can draw specifically Lightning Bolts or specific actions. Could be important to maybe splash this in some type of deck that doesn't run many actions. It only runs like 1 or 2 actions that contribute to some type of wombo combo. Wizard Shazam lets us find those cards, but at worst, Wizard Shazam is just draw a card and plays really well with the Lightning Bolt package that we've talked about. Moving on to Earthquake, this is a card I really don't know how to feel about. It's to deal 3 damage to all characters. My first thought was, well, you want to run this in some type of deck that is quite aggressive, you know? You want to use it to close out games, because why else would you be dealing 3 damage to all characters? Now, you could be using it as a board clear in a more defensive strategy, but so far, energy doesn't really seem to plug into that. Maybe it does if you run the magical spell package. Maybe you don't play a lot of creatures, and maybe it's worth playing this so it doesn't hurt your board too much, but it does hurt the opponent's board. That probably is the home for Earthquake, but my first thought for it was aggressive, and I don't think it works in aggressive at all. I've played a few games now on Tabletop Simulator using the more aggressive packages in the game, and I don't think I would ever want to play Earthquake because oftentimes my board is really full, and unless I'm literally ending the game with Earthquake, I don't think I'm going to be using it too much, at least in those aggressive packages. Again, I think it plugs straight into some more defensive options, but I don't think that's really going to be the home for energy. I think energy is going to be quite either aggressive or mid-rangey, and in either in those two cases, I don't think you're really going to want to run a board clear like this that can hurt you so much. Maybe if you're running a more defensive strategy or a more control-y strategy in another archetype, in another faction, and you want to run energy as your quote-unquote second faction, maybe Earthquake makes the cut in that type of deck. But I think like an energy-focused deck probably isn't going to be running too much of Earthquake. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something I'm missing as I look over all of the cards here. But for now, I don't see a home for Earthquake, at least not within the energy faction itself. Next up is Cosmic Staff, which is give a friendly recruit +1 firepower and generate a resource. So it's very difficult to judge this one. Effectively, it is a free card though, because when we play it, we're going to generate another resource. Now, we do have to wait until turn 3 until we're actually able to play this card. So again, we don't know what firepower does, so I'll refrain from judging this too much or giving a glowing review of it. But I will say, I think it's pretty good. Just no matter what firepower +1 is, generating a free resource after having played this card is pretty good, because again, it essentially acts as a free card. Moving on to Double Time. Double Time is a silver card, and it reads, give a friendly recruit Flurry this turn. That's a fantastic effect. We love that. We're jamming that in our aggressive stuff. That's great. I don't have much else to say about that other than that's fantastic. You're probably going to see some mid-rangey decks run this as well as a way to close out games. Decks that run some bigger cards, maybe even just mid-rangey decks that run Stripe, right? You just run Stripe and then you jam Double Time on Stripe. That's 16 damage right there. That's pretty good. That's more than half of most leaders' health. In fact, it's like 75% of most of their health. The final silver card we're going to talk about is Crystal Ball, and it reads, play the top card of your deck. That's already a cool card concept right there, but then on top of that, it has some additional text that reads, for the rest of the game, you can see the top card of your deck. And I think it has some interesting implications for the Lightning Bolt deck. Lightning Bolt deck is going to have a lot of situations where it wants to hold its Lightning Bolts to wait until it can pull off certain synergies and certain interactions that positively favor it. But then the Crystal Ball is going to not only get you deeper into your deck and draw you those lightning bolts, but it also is going to let you know, hey, maybe it's worth giving up this piece of synergy. Maybe it's worth, instead of holding onto this lightning bolt and doing nothing with it, you could draw this key important card that's right on top of your deck, and the Crystal Ball is going to tell you what that card is. So I really love the design behind this card, and I'm probably going to play it quite a lot, even if it doesn't end up being super competitively viable. Okay, let's move on to the big and exciting cards, the gold cards, the energy faction. I think we'll go in reverse order this time. So we won't focus on the synergy stuff first. First, we'll go over the cards that I think are just kind of don't fall into a particular package. Let's first start off with Geo-Force. Geo-Force is a gold card, and he's just an 8/7. Just a raw 8/7. So the downside of this compared to, say, something like the previously mentioned Stripe is, even though he's got +3 defense, he has the gold restriction, which means he won't be able to play this card, at least assuming we understand the game correctly based on our interpretation of what the game rules are on the website. You won't be able to play this card until turn 5. So you're going to have to wait until turn 5 to be able to play Geo-Force, where Stripe can go down as early as turn 3. So honestly, I think Geo-Force kind of sucks, but I've been wrong before, and I'm going to be excited to be proven wrong about Geo-Force. Switch things up and go to an action. First, Cosmic Treadmill, which reads, give recruits in your hand and deck Flurry. Draw a card. So again, we have to wait to play this card until turn 5. But it's got a pretty big upside of just giving everything in your deck Flurry. The only downside I see for this card is that you're probably already going to want to run quite a few cards that read Flurry. So honestly, by the time you play this card, I'm not sure how much value you're going to get out of it. And honestly, it's probably just better options. It is a draw card, which is nice though. It does get you one card deeper into the deck, and that is going to be important in some situations. So maybe it's worth it literally just for that. Plus, we have a very exciting card to talk about, which is this next card, which is the Speed Force, which honestly kind of does Cosmic Treadmill's job better than Cosmic Treadmill. The Speed Force reads, ready each recruit that attacked this turn. So this is better than Flurry, because not only does it give a card that doesn't otherwise have Flurry, the Flurry effect, which means it can attack again, but it gives cards with Flurry an additional attack. If I play Max Mercury and I attack with him twice, and then I play the Speed Force, I can attack with him a third time. But if I play Cosmic Treadmill and Max Mercury, I'm not getting any additional value. For that reason, I think Speed Force will see a lot more play than Cosmic Treadmill does. but I'd be happy to be proven wrong. All right, let's take a look at Shazam. Shazam's a really fun card. Shazam has speed, so he can attack the first turn that he comes into play, which is great, but he also has a really cool effect. He has, if Shazam would be KO'd, he instead transforms into Billy Batson. Billy Batson's card is right here. He's a bronze card, and he has 0 attack, 1 defense, with the effect start, transform Billy Batson into Shazam. So if the opponent doesn't deal with both Billy Batson and Shazam, you're going to get your Shazam back the very next turn, which is pretty exciting, right? It's constantly a threat. Also, I think it's really cool and thematic, right? Very, very cool. Moving on to Captain Atom. After a friendly character loses aura, Captain Atom gets +2/+2. Deploy, give each friendly character aura. Now, the cool thing about Captain Atom is a lot of people are going to think, oh, well, he just plugs into the aura package, but you don't really need to run Captain Atom in aura. You can run him in anything, right? Because he gives cards on your board aura. So as long as you have cards set up already, giving them aura is a great way to protect them, especially if you're going wide with your board, you're playing a lot of cards. So let's say I have 3 cards on board because I've been playing this really aggressive strategy and I'm constantly hitting my opponent in the face, but they've got this board clear card and they're really excited to clear my board. Maybe it's Earthquake, we just talked about Earthquake. They've just drawn Earthquake, they're really excited to play it, but I jam Captain Atom. And now what do? Now they can't clear my board at all because my cards have aura. And on top of that, if they do play their Earthquake because they didn't read the rest of Captain Atom's effect, all of those cards that would otherwise be destroyed now have +2/+2 instead. Is it worth the deck slot in an aggressive deck? I'm not sure, especially because it has quite a bit of competition, especially in the gold slot, because we've got the previously mentioned Shazam, we got the previously mentioned Speed Force, and the upcoming card, the card we're about to talk about, Black Adam. Black Adam is again, another gold card here, a 5/8 with the effect Start, deal 5 damage to an enemy character. That's a heck of a lot of damage to just get at the start of each turn. It doesn't sound like this is a random either. It sounds like we can target it. There's a handful of effects that sound like you can do something despite it being in like a weird timing of the game. Like start of turn is not usually something you can choose to target, at least in card games, at least in digital card games. But it sounds like this is something you can target because it doesn't specifically say random. That might just be because you should know that, hey, this has to be random because it's start of turn. So maybe this is random. It's hard to say for now. But my current assumption is actually that you can select a target for this, which is pretty good. Either way, I think this card's great. This is probably the top end for that aggressive package we talked about before. Speaking of the top end for those aggressive strategies, let's talk about the Flash. The Flash is a 3/3. It's a really low stats for a gold card, but you're about to see why. He has speed, so he can attack the first turn he comes into play. Plus, the Flash is invincible on your turn. After you play an energy card, ready the Flash. So honestly, this isn't really a payoff for the aggressive strategies. I kind of jumped the gun there a little bit. What he's a big payoff for is the lightning bolt strategies. If you hold your lightning bolts, let's say I hold 4 lightning bolts in my hand throughout the game. I finally jam the Flash on turn 5. I go Flash, attack, lightning bolt, attack, lightning bolt, attack. With those 4 lightning bolts, I've generated 23 damage. Now, obviously, that's a super ideal situation, and all I've done there is spend 1 action, by the way. I still have another action to go. And just in case there's any question, yes, the lightning bolts do count as energy cards. So the Flash is absolutely the finisher for the lightning bolt deck. At least I think so. And I'm excited to hear that, man, because I was excited to play with the Lightning Bolt package, and I'm a big Flash fan, so you can expect to see me playing quite a bit of the Lightning Bolt package with this version of the Flash. Moving on to Hal Jordan. Hal Jordan is a 5/5. This is the big payoff for the Green Lanterns, and it's a pretty cool one. He reads, deploy, you may pay another bronze resource to double the power and defense of Hal Jordan and a random Green Lantern in your hand. So Hal Jordan's just going to end up being a 10/10 a lot of the time, and he's also going to double the power and defense of something in your hand, which in a lot of cases is going to be really good for you. Think back to Kyle Rayner, think back to John Stewart. These are all fantastic outcomes for you, and for that reason, I do expect Green Lanterns to be quite strong. Next up is Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate is a 7/6. He reads, deploy, seek a magical spell. So again, going back to that seek terminology, that means I'm going to be able to choose 1 of 3 options, at least that's our current interpretation, and that seems pretty good. 7/6 is definitely no joke for stats, and you're generating another card. Seems pretty good to me. Plus, you have some control over what that card is. What's an even bigger deal than that is the big payoff card for the magical spells, and that's Giovanni Zatara. Giovanni Zatara is a 6/6, and he reads, end, deal 1 damage to an enemy leader, to each enemy leader. Wow, this is even way better than I thought. For each magical spell you've played this game. We've seen a lot of magical spell synergy throughout this video, so you can imagine you could probably play quite a few of those throughout the game, especially when you factor in cards like Gift of Nabu. But that's it. That's our final card. I can't believe we did it. We managed to talk about every single energy card in the game, and we even got to talk about all of the tokens. If you have a specific faction you want me to talk about next, please let me know in the comments. I'm already working on those videos. It just tells me which one to prioritize next. Huge fan of this, man. I am so excited about the future of this game, and I hope you are too. Keep being awesome, and I'll catch you in the next one.